the upcoming maybe move of the U.S. Embassy to the capital city of Jerusalem. We're going to talk about why yes, we're going to talk about why people are saying no, and then we're going to explain why those reasons that people are saying no are actually the reason why yes. All right, so let me just give you a little background on this issue. The United States of America passed a law in the Senate years ago that the U.S. Embassy should be moved to the capital city of Jerusalem. Now, the status right now is that Israel is the only country in the world where the U.S. Embassy is not stationed in the stated capital city. Every other country in the world that America is an embassy in is in the capital city. Only Israel, the Jewish state, is the only country in the world where America has their U.S. Embassy out of the city of Jerusalem, which is the stated capital of the Jewish state of Israel. Now, we're going to talk a little bit about what the reason for that is. We're going to talk about the claims of the Muslims and the Arabs and the left-wingers. I should actually put the left-wingers first because in my humble opinion, they are really the source of the problem, not actually the Arabs, which I will discuss in 1 second. Let's just go back a little bit in history, shall we? Let's talk about Jerusalem as a general subject, and we're going to talk about America and the U.S. Embassy and what it all means. So first of all, if we're talking about the city of Jerusalem, the city of Jerusalem has been Jewish for 3,500 years approximately. King David originally made his kingdom in the city of Hebron, and then 7 years later moved to Jerusalem and put his whole castle and the whole city of Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. That happened long before any Muslims existed in the world, or any Christians for that matter. Certainly there are no such Arabs who call themselves Palestinians. That didn't happen until 1964, but we'll get to that in 1 second. In any case, Jerusalem throughout history, without break, has been called the holiest Jewish city and the capital of Israel, the land of Israel for the Jewish people. That has never changed in 3,500 years. 2,000 years since the last temple was destroyed on the Temple Mount. We'll discuss it also in 1 second. The Jews have always faced Jerusalem to pray, while the Muslims stick their rear ends out towards Jerusalem and bow down towards Mecca. In other words, when they are on their mosque that they built on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, they occupied the Temple Mount, it's the Jewish Temple Mount. They built a mosque and the shrine on that Temple Mount, and when they pray, they bow down towards Mecca, which means they're sticking their rear ends out to what's known as the Holy of Holies on the Temple Mount. In terms of Jerusalem, it's mentioned over 500 times in the Old Testament. It is mentioned in the Quran 0 times. It is not mentioned in the Quran whatsoever, ever in the Quran, not once. Now, when I say not mentioned in the Quran, the Muslims jump up and say, what are you talking about? Al-Aqsa is mentioned. That is true. Al-Aqsa is mentioned. Al-Aqsa is what they call the mosque in Jerusalem. But Al-Aqsa is not the mosque in Jerusalem. Al-Aqsa means the farthest mosque. And when Muhammad was alive, he was living in Saudi Arabia, there was an Al-Aqsa mosque. That's what was written about in the Quran. Now, the Al-Aqsa mosque in the Quran was not talking about the Jerusalem mosque, which did not exist yet. It was talking about a mosque that was the farthest away from where Muhammad was living at the time. The Al-Aqsa originally mosque was in Saudi Arabia. It was nowhere near Jerusalem ever, okay? 100 years after Muhammad died, they built a shrine in Jerusalem and a mosque in Jerusalem on the Temple Mount. Now, just to understand how ludicrous and ridiculous this situation is, when the Muslims built that mosque on the Temple Mount, they called it Beit al-Muqdas, which means the house on top of the temple. They actually admit by the name that they've occupied an area not theirs and built a mosque and a shrine on top of the Jewish Temple Mount. So I love when all those left-wingers, those bleeding heart left-wingers, talk about their opposition to the occupation, but when there's historically founded and proved occupation by the Muslims on the Jewish Temple Mount, when they build a mosque and a shrine on the holiest Jewish place in the world, and there's proven historical occupation of Muslims of the holiest place for the Jewish nation, that the bleeding heart leftists don't care. They say, well, it's there already. When Jews build homes legally in Judea and Samaria, the leftists say, well, we don't care if it's legal or not. It's occupied territory, so therefore destroy the houses. But it's okay for the Muslims to build a mosque and a shrine on the Jewish Temple Mount. That doesn't bother the leftists at all. We're going to get to the leftists in a couple of minutes. Let's fast forward just a little bit. Throughout history, Jerusalem was never known as an Islamic holy city. This is not my opinion. This is just fact. If you give me a time in history when Jerusalem was ever looked on by the Muslims as a holy city, I will raise a Palestinian flag on my house. In fact, they treated Jerusalem like a garbage dump. We know Mark Twain, when he came to Jerusalem, he called it a desolate and dead area. Mark Twain wasn't in the 1400s, 7th century. We're talking about in the 1800s. He came, it was a desolate area, dead, he said. To imagine this was a holy city was imaginable, according to Mark Twain. So if the Muslims believed it was holy, tell me the years that happened. And it gets worse. Again, in the Quran, Jerusalem's not mentioned once. It was never a Muslim holy city ever in the history of the world. It never was an Arab capital city either. That's in terms of history. Okay, let's move on just a little bit. In 1948, the Hashemites, a foreign power coming from Saudi Arabia. The Hashemites are not from this area at all. They are from Saudi Arabia, and there were peasants there. They came and took over the area known as Transjordan, which is on the other side of the Jordan River. They have no historical, national, or religious claims on that land whatsoever. They took it over illegally and brutally without any legal or justified excuse. They took over the whole eastern side of the Jordan River. Now, what is the western side of the Jordan River called? That's called Israel today. And the Arabs have called that the West Bank. The West Bank is not the West Bank of the Jordan River. The West Bank, what they mean is Israel. Oh, you want me to prove that? No problem. They call Hebron the West Bank. So if this is the West Bank of the Jordan River, Hebron is over here. It's not close to the West Bank of the Jordan River, but they call it the West Bank because all of Israel, according to the Arabs, is the West Bank. And to hear, people in the world, including Jews and even Israelis, use that word West Bank is completely ludicrous and ridiculous. But let's move forward just a little bit. We're not talking about Jordan today. 1948, after the Arabs refused a partition plan, they attacked not the Palestinians. This is very important to clarify. Palestinians did not refuse the partition plan. The Palestinians were not involved at all with even the idea of a partition plan. It was given to the Arab League. There was no such entity as the Palestinian Arabs. Everything before 1948 that was nationally Palestinian was actually Jewish. The Palestine Company was Jewish. The Palestine Post is the Jerusalem Post. It was a Jewish Zionist newspaper. The Palestine Philharmonic was a Jewish band. The Palestine football team was a Jewish football team whose flag in the 1930s was a Jewish star. Okay, all these things were Jewish. There was no Arab national Palestinian anything. Okay, we're going to discuss how that developed over the years afterwards. In 1948, the Arabs refused the partition plan and attacked the very young state of Israel with the goal of annihilating the Jewish state and pushing the Jews into the sea. The Jews miraculously won that war. Now, when I say miraculously, I mean that we're talking about most of the country coming out of Europe, out of the Holocaust. No energy, no koach, no power. Weapons was very scarce. We were outnumbered 20-1. The weapons and the planes were there's nothing to talk about. And we miraculously won the war. When I say won the war, it means we did not die. That is winning the war for Israel. But the war was ended when Jerusalem, Judea, and Samaria were in Arab control. The war ended when the Gaza Strip and the Golan Heights was in Arab control. Again, let me reiterate what I just said. Jerusalem, Judea, and Samaria, the Gaza Strip and the Golan Heights were in Arab control. In other words, all the disputed areas today, that the Arabs are claiming if Israel just gives up, there'll be peace, was already in Arab control in 1948 to 1967. It was during those years in 1964 that PLO, the Palestine Liberation Organization, a terrorist organization whose goal was to destroy the Jewish state, was created. So they created a terrorist organization during the years that they actually had the land, which today they're calling disputed, and today they're saying that this is the reason why we're struggling, because Israel houses those lands. But they created the terrorist organization when those lands were actually in Arab control. 1948, the war was over, and Jerusalem, Judea, and Samaria was in control of the Hashemites, the Jordanian government. Now, Jordan is 2 years older than Israel. Israel is 70 years, Jordan is 72 years old. All right, the Hashemites took it over in 1922 and originally recognized as an official state, I think in 1946 or 45 or 46, 2 years old. They have no rights to this land. Certainly, if they have a right to come from the outside with no historical, national, religious connection to the area, and the world recognizes somehow their occupation as a right, not to recognize the Jewish rights, the real Jewish rights, historically, nationally, and religiously, is pure anti-Semitism. But we're not going to go into that right now. In any case, Jordan was in charge of Jerusalem. And at the time that Jordan took over Jerusalem in 1948, they cut the city in half. In other words, for those of you who think that the words East and West Jerusalem are a biblical term, please get educated. East and West Jerusalem was created in 1948 when the Jordanians took over. The Arabs took over, not the Palestinians, the Jordanians took over Jerusalem and put a wall in Jerusalem and split the city up between the east and the west sides of the city. What does that mean in terms of practicality? It means no Jews are allowed on the east side of the city. Any Jew stuck his head out, even in a tower that was over the wall they built, stuck their head out towards the east side, was shot dead by one of the Jordanian soldiers. That is the first creation of an East and West Jerusalem. You all know that before 1948, there was no such thing as East and West Jerusalem. Jerusalem was never split in the history of the world. The split came was when the Arabs or Jordanians took over Jerusalem and kept East Jerusalem empty of Jews. That's where the word and the term East Jerusalem came from. To hear the left-wingers, again, I don't expect anything out of the Arabs. I don't expect anything out of the Muslims, okay? I don't even expect anything out of the UN or UNESCO, but when you hear leftists, Israelis, Jews, talking about a solution implementing that East and West Jerusalem, again, it is totally ludicrous. It's idiotic. How could anybody, especially a Jew, want to go back to terms that Arabs create in order to keep Jews out of the city? How is it possible that some human activist, human rights activist, peace activist, wants to go back to a situation that the Arabs created where they kept the city clean of Jews? Okay, but again, as usual, the left wing are pigs in sheepskin, right? They wrap themselves in human rights and morality and compassion when they're really completely immoral, dishonest, and have the most lacking compassion that anybody can possibly have. They have compassion to those who are cruel. They're compassionate to those who seek to kill and murder others. I always say, what's a left winger? A left winger is someone who protects and defends the rights of everybody except for those who are actually being threatened by the people that the left-wingers are defending, right? In other words, no racial profiling in airports. Why? It offends people. Okay, but statistics say that the majority of international terrorism is being carried out in the name of Islam. Whether it's really Islam or not is a question. I'm not going into it, but it's carried out in the name of Islam. The majority of international terrorists come from the Muslim religion. That doesn't mean that all Muslims are terrorists. I don't believe that, and I didn't say that. So if it was Jews who was carrying out international terrorism all the time, and they decided to racially profile Jews, and I am not a terrorist, and I would go in TSA would be swiping me down and make me get naked, I'd be very insulted and angry, but not at TSA. I'd be insulted and angry at the other Jews who are using my religion for terrorism. So yes, racial profiling does make sense, and do I feel bad for the moderate Muslim who's not guilty? Of course I feel bad for him, but he should be the first one to cooperate. Because the radical Muslim who's using his religion to kill people will kill him also. But again, that's for another show. In any case, East and West Jerusalem came about when Jordan. In 1967, okay, you had the leaders of Egypt, Nasser, call for the destruction and annihilation of the Jewish state, saying the quote is, we're going to correct the mistake we made years ago. And his goal was to murder all the Jews in the area. And he kicked out the UN Peacekeeping Corps from the Sinai. And he brought all his troops up to the border. This is 1967. Israel obviously is not going to go again sheep to the slaughterhouse, so we preempted a strike. And we told the Jordanian leadership we have no desire to go to war with you. We had no, and again, I find this terribly reprehensible, but we had no intent of taking over the occupied areas by Jordan. We didn't have an intent of taking over Jerusalem or Hebron or Shechem, even though cities are rightfully ours. Israel in 1967 had no intention of doing so. We told Jordan stay out of the war, which Jordan said they would. Well, when Jews are being attacked, Arabs can't just they can't control themselves. So Jordan entered the war. By the end of the war, 6 days later, Israel miraculously defeated 6 Arab nations and liberated Jerusalem. What does the word liberated mean? It means till that point, Jews were not allowed to go into the old city. So we liberated Jerusalem. Jerusalem being a 3,500-year-old Jewish city, never a Muslim holy city, never an Arab capital. Even when they had control, it wasn't an Arab capital. All right? So we liberated the area, and we took control, and we took down that separation wall. Okay? And now you have freedom of religion in Jerusalem, which again, whether it's good or not, is for another show. But it was considered the capital of Israel by the state of Israel. America not moving its embassy to Jerusalem is not bringing up a question in terms of who does Jerusalem belong to. It brings up a question about the integrity of the United States of America. In other words, what is their objective, or what is their agenda, or what do they get by not moving their embassy to Jerusalem? Who are they defending? They're defending the same kind of people who have the culture to fly planes into the Twin Towers. They're defending the same kind of people who are burning American flags. And they're slapping in the face their closest ally and friend, Israel. Now, when I say closest ally and friend, Israel, I'm not talking about the fact that, we're just good friends. We share a value system. The values are the same. We have we have the same enemies who are burning American flags or burning Israeli flags. So America, when you don't move the embassy to Jerusalem, Number one, it's a stain on your integrity. It's a stain on your historical integrity. You know, as a Christian, again, America was born as a Christian country with Judeo-Christian values. So the Bible, whether, again, you're Christian or Jewish, you know that Jerusalem belongs to the Jewish people. It's mentioned 500 times in the Bible. So you're not moving the embassy to Jerusalem. You're not only spitting in Israel's face, you're spitting in God's face. Okay, so that's number one, lacking historical integrity. Number two is you're slapping Israel in the face. With all the joint intelligence that we have, with all the joint value system that we have, with all the joint enemies that we have, why would you choose to do that? Why would you choose to slap Israel in the face? For what reason? Okay, number three, and perhaps the most ridiculous result of not moving to the embassy to Jerusalem is you're becoming radical Islamic terrorist apologetics. You're not doing it intentionally, of course, but that's the effect. What happened when Trump said, I'm going to move the embassy to Jerusalem? You had the terrorist in a suit, Abu Mazen, and the terrorist in a keffiyeh from Hamas. They're both terrorists. Just one guy's wearing a suit and one guy's wearing a keffiyeh. They both threaten the world. They said if Trump moves the embassy to Jerusalem, the world will pay a price. I don't know about you, but that to me sounds like a threat. That to me sounds like blackmail. Complete and total blackmail. And instead of the world flipping these radical Muslim terrorists the bird and saying, you know what, you guys, pipe down. We're moving the embassy because it's the right thing to do. It's the truthful thing to do. It's the historical thing to do, the religious thing to do, and the strong thing to do, and just the right thing to do. Instead of saying that, oh wait, let's back off a little bit. We don't want any terrorist attacks. Okay, it's that kind of apologetic-like attitude that causes terrorism. Okay? Again, not intentionally, but that is the result. Okay? The terrorists realize that their threats and their promises of some kind of Armageddon works. So now every time America threatens to do something that's right, they're going to threaten to cause terrorism. America's going to back off. So for those three reasons mainly, America should be moving the embassy to Jerusalem. Now let's move on to the leftists just a little bit. Okay? The leftists, they don't care about history. They don't care about historical facts. They don't care about truths. They care about nothing except showing compassion to those who are actually advocating a culture that would kill actually the leftist. In other words, every Friday on the Temple Mount, you can hear this, you can watch it on YouTube, hear it online. I have some recordings of it. You could hear the clerics from the Temple Mount, from the mosque, calling to slaughter Jews, not slaughter Zionists. Okay, don't let these total liars, these dishonest terrorists, when they say, well, we don't hate Jews, we just hate Zionists. Okay, listen, it's beautiful words, all right? And there are stupid, ridiculous, idiotic Jews who go along with that. You even have these Jews who are dressing like ultra-Orthodox Jews, the Neturei Karta, who hold up, go to Hezbollah and go to Hamas, whose charter is out of Book of Mein Kampf. Please go read it. Read it online. Download it in English. So these Neturei Karta guys, they don't represent ultra-Orthodox Judaism or Judaism at all. They're literally enemies of the Jews, because Hamas is calling for the annihilation of Jews, not Zionists, and Hamas are going to meet with them. So there's nothing to talk about. But in any case, the idea is that these leftists, the people who are talking about human rights, they completely and totally ignore the vocal and the clear call of murder every single Friday from the mosque on the Temple Mount. They ignore the call for the murder of Jews. They completely ignore it. Now, if a Jew gets up, doesn't call for the murder of Muslims, because we don't do that, they call for the murder of Muslim terrorists. If a soldier, for example, takes out a Muslim terrorist who stabbed a soldier, the left wing will be up in their hind legs screaming, murder, murder, because the soldier killed a terrorist. But when Muslims get up and vocally call to murder, systematically slaughter Jews, annihilate them, when the clerics in the Temple Mount get up and call the Jews pigs and monkeys according to the hadiths, the religious Muslim texts, they're the leftists all of a sudden close their eyes and we didn't hear it. Oh, let them have freedom on the Temple Mount. A guy gets shot on the Temple Mount, we put on metal detectors, the Muslims get violent. The leftists say, what are you putting on metal detectors for? You have to occupy them more? Because the leftists have nothing to do with truths or facts or integrity or morality or compassion. It's all a sheepskin. Okay, I'll just give you a little example that Judaism talks about. You know, Judaism puts the pig in a separate category, right? So the pig is really extra impure. And the question is why? A horse is also not kosher, right? So why is the pig put in a separate category? Well, it says because the pig is the only animal, by the way, for those of you who don't know this, the pig is the only animal, the Torah mentions it inside, that has split hooves. There are two signs for a kosher animal. One, it has to have split hooves, and two, it has to chew its cud. Why those signs, the reasons? Not now. We don't even know the reasons, right? But there are two, split hooves and chews its cud. One is external, one is internal. The pig is the only animal written by the Torah that has the external signs of a kosher animal. Has the split hooves, does not chew its cud. And therefore, it says the pig walks out with its split hooves. Look at me, I'm kosher, unkosher. Internally, it's a pig. So we put it in a separate class, meaning it tries to act kosher, but it's a pig. That is what left-wingers do. That is what social justice warriors do. They've got the kosher external, oh, we love humanity and compassion, and let's give rights to people. Oh, no this and no that. Oh, we love everyone. All the external signs, right? Get the Nazis off our streets, right? All these sayings, all the external signs are the split hooves. The problem is internally, they're pigs. They have no compassion. They actually defend immorality. They defend terrorism, right? They call people Nazis because they disagree with them. So the external behavior, the demonstrations are like the split hooves. Oh, look at us. We're social justice warriors. We're very moral. We have compassion. When what they're really doing is defending terrorism. So don't buy into that. Those who are real liberals, those who really have compassion, the first step of compassion is adopting truth, not adopting lies. When you have compassion to the wrong people, you're actually evil. If you had compassion towards Hitler, compassion is not a good thing. If you're making peace with Hitler, that's not a positive thing. Peace is not always positive. If someone bursts into your house and is killing and murdering and slaughtering your family, to talk to them and try to make peace with them is not a good thing. It is the definition of evil. So this is what left-wingers do. This is the left-wing movement is an immoral, unethical, dishonest, totally incompassionate movement. Don't get tricked by their sheepskin. So dear America, President Donald J. Trump, no more excuses. You gotta move the embassy to Jerusalem. 3 reasons. Number 1, it's the right thing to do historically, nationally, and religiously. Number 2, Israel's your best friend. Stop slapping us in the face. And number 3, don't give in to terrorism. You've been listening to the Ari Ufel Israel live show. I'm asking everyone, hit that share button, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, wherever you are. Share this information out there. I want to remind everyone again, these are my opinions and my statements alone and do not stand for the ILTV staff in any way or form. God bless. Have an awesome week, everyone, from the beautiful, stunning rolling hills of Judea, Israel.